You've heard about Iran's nuclear ambitions, but did you know its fate has been foretold in Scripture for thousands of years? From Genesis to Revelation, Iran once called Persia is mentioned in key prophecies that show how its past and future are intertwined with the end of the world. This isn't just ancient history. These prophecies aren't just about the past, they point to the future. What does the Bible really say about Persia's role in the final battle? Get ready to see prophecy in a whole new light. Most people skim past the names in Genesis 10. Two of them, Madai and Elam, hold the key to understanding Iran's destiny. These weren't just random descendants in a family tree. Madai and Elam, Noah's grandsons, set in motion the bloodlines that would give rise to one of history's most powerful empires, shaping world events even today. Let's take a step back. After the floodwaters receded, humanity began anew. Noah's sons spread across the earth to repopulate it. Japheth headed north, and Madai's descendants settled in the rugged Iranian highlands, eventually forming the Medes. This wasn't a tribe of wandering shepherds. They were fierce warriors, bred in the high pastures and built for endurance. The Medes weren't just surviving, they were training to conquer. Imagine this: a society where every man is raised as a soldier, where tribal independence fuels collective defense. Over time, these warrior clans united, laying the groundwork for what would become the Persian Empire. This wasn't just a random collection of tribes, it was a military culture. It's disciplined and relentless, with every tribe contributing to a greater whole. Together, they would rise, and history would tremble. Meanwhile, down south, Elam's descendants were doing something completely different. In the fertile river valleys near the Persian Gulf, they weren't just surviving, they were thriving. They built urban centers, developed sophisticated irrigation, and established complex legal systems. And long before the rest of the world caught up, they created an early written script, linear Elamite. Centuries ahead of the cuneiform used elsewhere. The Elamites weren't just staying put either. Their capital city, Susa, became a bustling commercial hub. Merchants from all over the ancient world gathered there, exchanging not just goods, but ideas. The Elamites expanded their influence through military campaigns and diplomacy, extending their reach far beyond the river valleys. They weren't content with small victories, they wanted to dominate. Fast forward to Genesis 14, where Elam's power is truly tested. Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, leads a coalition of armies against the Canaanites. This wasn't a small skirmish, it was one of the earliest recorded battles in the Bible. The eastern army swept through Canaan like a storm, conquering fortified cities and looting everything in their path. But then comes the twist. When Chedorlaomer's forces captured Lot and the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, they didn't expect the unexpected. Abraham, just 318 trained servants, launched a daring night attack. Against all odds, Abraham's small force routed the invaders, rescued the captives, and sent the victorious armies fleeing. It was a miracle that defied military logic, showing that no matter how powerful Iran's ancestors were, they were not immune to a higher power. That higher power would continue to shape Iran's destiny. Centuries later, a Hebrew exile in Babylon would receive visions that revealed the true role Persia would play in sacred history, one that would reshape not only Israel's future, but the world's. In the grandeur of Nebuchadnezzar's marble palace, a young Hebrew captive named Daniel stood before the most powerful man on earth. The king had been haunted by a dream so terrifying it robbed him of sleep. Yet, the more he tried to recall its details, the more elusive it became. But Daniel, blessed with divine revelation, saw beyond the king's nightmare. What he witnessed wasn't just a royal vision, it was a divine blueprint for human history, with Iran at its center. Picture this: a colossal statue rising over the landscape, its body made of different metals, each one symbolizing an empire. The head was gold, representing the mighty Babylonian kingdom. But it was the silver chest and arms that caught Daniel's attention. The silver was a prophecy, not of one kingdom, but two, Media and Persia, united to overthrow Babylon's golden rule. Daniel knew that Persia wouldn't just replace Babylon, it would eclipse it, becoming an empire that would dwarf Nebuchadnezzar's mighty realm. This wasn't just another political prediction. This was divine insight into the rise of Iran. The silver chest wasn't random. It was a precise symbol of the Medo-Persian alliance, emerging from the Iranian highlands. The dual nature of the symbol reflected the union of the Medes and Persians, two tribes combining their strength to form an empire unlike any before it. Time passed. Then came Daniel's most unsettling vision yet. Standing by the Mediterranean, he watched as four monstrous beasts rose from the churning waters, each one representing a future empire. But it was the bear with 3 ribs in its mouth that told Persia's story. This bear wasn't just big, it was lopsided, with one side raised higher than the other, showing the dominance of Persia over its weaker counterpart, the Medes. The 3 ribs of Lydia, Babylon, and Egypt represented Persia's greatest conquests, the nations it would devour and absorb into its empire. Now, here's the kicker. The bear's posture revealed Persia's true nature. It wouldn't simply conquer, it would consume. Persia wasn't just expanding its borders, it was absorbing entire civilizations, their wealth, their people, their culture. This wasn't just a fight for power. It was a systematic dismantling of everything in its path. Then, in his later years, Daniel received his most detailed prophecy. And by the Ulai River, he saw a ram with 2 unequal horns charging forward. One horn was longer than the other, representing Media and Persia. The longer horn? That symbolized Persia's eventual rise to dominance, overshadowing the Medes. The ram's movements to the west, north, and south mapped out Persia's exact territorial expansion in the years to come. These weren't the visions of a dreamer, they were divine revelations. God had given Daniel a roadmap for the future, showing how Iran would rise not just as a regional power, but as the instrument through which divine prophecy would unfold. But Daniel's visions were only the beginning. In the courts of Jerusalem, an even greater revelation was waiting to be revealed. In the heart of Jerusalem's temple, the prophet Isaiah received a revelation that would shock the world for generations to come. God named a ruler who wouldn't even be born for another century and a half. Cyrus of Persia. Isaiah 45:1 captures God's words. This is what the Lord says to his anointed, to Cyrus. Imagine that a pagan king being called God's chosen Messiah. This was no mere political prediction. It was a divine appointment, made long before the Persian Empire even existed. And the prophecy didn't stop there. Isaiah's words were precise. This future king wasn't just going to conquer. He would break the chains of Jewish captivity, fund their return to Jerusalem, and order the rebuilding of the temple that Nebuchadnezzar had destroyed. Isaiah spoke these promises while Babylon was still on the rise, before the exile had even begun. Israel's restoration wasn't going to come from internal rebellion or gradual political change. It was going to come from Cyrus, a Persian king who hadn't even heard of the God of Israel. Then, Cyrus emerged from the rugged Iranian highlands. For centuries, the Medes and Persians had kept separate identities. The mountain warriors of Media and the valley dwellers of Persia shared little beyond proximity. But Cyrus, he united them into a force that would conquer 3 continents. His military genius was matched only by his diplomatic skill, creating systems that allowed diverse people to maintain their customs while serving Persian interests. He didn't just create an empire, he created a unified world. And that world-changing empire, it came with a war machine like no other. Cyrus organized his forces into specialized units that could operate independently, maintaining communication across vast distances. The empire's advanced road network connected even the most distant provinces to the heart of power, ensuring rapid deployment of troops and resources when needed. This infrastructure would prove vital when Cyrus turned his sights on Babylon, a city that seemed invincible. But Babylon wasn't as secure as it thought. The night king Belshazzar of Babylon held his infamous feast, using sacred vessels from Jerusalem's temple as drinking cups. A mysterious hand appeared on the palace wall. Daniel interpreted the cryptic message as divine judgment, declaring that Babylon's reign would end that very night. While the king's feast continued, Persian engineers were already executing a brilliant strategy that bypassed Babylon's legendary walls. Here's how they did it. The Euphrates River ran through Babylon's heart, and its underwater gates were its most famous defense. Persian forces diverted the river upstream, lowering the water level enough to send soldiers wading along the riverbed directly into the city. This took precise timing and flawless execution, and it worked. Babylon's defenders never saw it coming. By the time they realized they were under attack, Persian soldiers were already inside. Cyrus's victory over Babylon wasn't just a military conquest. It was the fulfillment of a prophecy. Within months of taking the city, Cyrus issued the decree Isaiah had foreseen 150 years earlier. A single proclamation from the Persian king ended 70 years of Jewish exile. He provided the funds for rebuilding the temple and ensured the safety of any exiles who wished to return. The Cyrus cylinder, an ancient artifact, confirms this extraordinary act of religious tolerance and state-sponsored restoration. The rebuilding of the temple began under Persian military protection. Zerubbabel and Joshua led the exiles, and Persian governors ensured that local opposition couldn't stop the construction. They provided the resources, materials, and funds to bring Cyrus's promise to life. Through Cyrus, ancient Persia became the only non-Jewish empire to directly fulfill God's plan for Israel's restoration. A plan set in motion long before the Persian tribes even unified. But the Persian Empire's role in God's plan wasn't finished. In the magnificent palace of Susa, another divine appointment was about to unfold. In the heart of the Persian Empire, a Jewish orphan named Hadassah was about to step into a destiny she never could have imagined. Chosen from hundreds of candidates for her beauty, she became Queen Esther, but her true purpose remained hidden even from her. The same empire that had liberated Israel from Babylonian captivity was now facing its greatest test of divine providence. Esther's rise to the throne wasn't because of political scheming or family wealth. She was an orphan, raised by her cousin Mordecai, with no royal bloodline or influential sponsors to push her into the king's favor. Yet when Esther finally stood before King Ahasuerus, she captured his heart instantly, winning the royal crown and becoming the queen of the mighty Persian Empire. But peace didn't last long. Just as the Jewish communities across the empire were finding protection, a deadly threat loomed. Haman the Agagite, a man whose Amalekite ancestry tied him to Israel's ancient enemies, had risen to the position of the king's chief minister. This wasn't just a matter of personal prejudice. It was a centuries-old blood feud. Haman's hatred for the Jews was rooted in an ancient command from God to destroy his people's ancestors. When Mordecai, refusing to bow to him at the palace gate, unknowingly sparked Haman's fury, a plot was set into motion that would affect the fate of an entire people. Haman's solution to his wounded pride: genocide. He approached King Ahasuerus with a deceitful proposal, claiming that a certain people in the empire, without naming the Jews, refused to follow Persian laws and threatened royal authority. With this manipulation, he convinced the king to authorize their total extermination. The royal decree was signed, sealed with the king's signet ring, and a date for the massacre was set: the 13th day of the 12th month, chosen by casting lots, called Pur. The news of the decree spread like wildfire. In an instant, the empire's administrative system that had once helped the Jews return to Jerusalem was now turned against them. The decree gave anyone in the empire the right to end Jews and plunder their property without legal repercussions. It was a sentence of death, backed by royal authority, and there was no place for the Jews to hide. When Mordecai learned of the plot, his heart broke. He tore his clothes, donned sackcloth, and publicly mourned outside the palace gates. He sent word to Esther, urging her to approach the king and plead for her people. But Esther knew the danger. Approaching the king without being summoned meant certain death unless he extended his golden scepter. Mordecai's words struck deep. He told her, "If you remain silent, deliverance will come from another source, but you and your family will perish. Perhaps you have been placed in this position for just this moment." Esther's response was nothing short of transformative. She planned to approach the king and say, "If I perish, I perish." She fasted with her people for 3 days, preparing herself for the ultimate risk, and then, with unwavering faith, Esther stepped into the throne room uninvited. The king, startled but moved, extended his scepter, sparing her life and offering her anything she desired, up to half his kingdom. But Esther's request was different. She invited both the king and Haman to a private banquet, beginning a carefully orchestrated plan that would expose Haman's plot and turn the tables on the impending massacre. Once again, the Persian Empire became God's instrument of deliverance. Esther's bravery saved her people, and the death sentence was reversed. But this wouldn't be the last time Persia played a crucial role in sacred history. Centuries later, when the most significant birth in human history occurred, It would be the Persian Magi, wise men who recognized what Israel's own leaders had missed, who would seek out the newborn king of the Jews. In the ancient Persian highlands, a brilliant star appeared in the eastern sky, signaling the start of a journey that would change the course of history forever. But the men who first understood its significance weren't Jewish rabbis or Roman astronomers. They were the Magi, the wise men of Persia's ancient priestly class. These men had spent centuries studying celestial events, believing that the stars carried divine messages. In this particular star, it announced something unprecedented. The Magi were more than astronomers. They were part of an elite caste, revered for their mastery of astronomy, mathematics, and prophetic literature. Their libraries held scrolls that traced back to the time of Daniel, when he served in the courts of Babylon and Persia. While Jewish scholars focused on preserving the law, the Persian wise men studied Daniel's prophecies about the coming Messiah. They read the famous words, "From the decree to restore Jerusalem, till the Messiah shall be 69 weeks." And they knew the time had come for the Messiah's arrival. For generations, the Magi had tracked the years since Artaxerxes issued his decree to Nehemiah. Their careful astronomical observations had confirmed what their calculations had predicted. When the star appeared in the sky, they knew immediately. This was the sign they had been waiting for. Their months-long journey across the harsh desert wasn't a casual pursuit. These men didn't follow a passing celestial event. They followed a divine call. The star's appearance wasn't just a curiosity. It was a signal from God, demanding their immediate response. They weren't just travelers, they were men of faith, on a sacred mission. And the gifts they brought, these weren't ordinary presents, they were filled with prophetic significance. Gold represented royal authority, acknowledging the child as the king of all nations. Frankincense was used in worship, recognizing the infant's divine nature as God incarnate. And myrrh, used in embalming, pointed to the sacrificial death this child would face to provide salvation for mankind. But why 3 gifts? What would these gifts mean for the world to come? Their arrival in Jerusalem caused a stir. King Herod, threatened by the prophecy, summoned the chief priests and scribes to find out where the Messiah was to be born. But these learned Jews had to consult their scrolls to answer the question. Here were foreign magi, with greater understanding of messianic prophecy than the very people who had preserved these sacred texts. While Jerusalem's religious leaders remained skeptical and passive, the Magi recognized the fulfillment of ancient promises. This moment was profound. The Magi were the first Gentiles to acknowledge Jesus as the promised Messiah. Their worship fulfilled Isaiah's prophecy that nations would come to his light, kings to the brightness of his rising. It marked the moment when salvation was revealed as not just for the Jews, but for all humanity. The empire that had once freed Israel from Babylonian captivity was now providing the first international recognition of Israel's greatest gift to the world. Herod's murderous plot to eliminate the Messiah revealed the stark contrast between earthly power and divine authority. While the Jewish king resorted to violence to protect his throne, the Magi, following divine wisdom, recognized that true power comes from heaven. Their obedience to the divine warning saved the Holy Family from destruction. And once again, Persia, this time through the Magi, became God's instrument of protection for his people. The star that had guided the Magi disappeared after fulfilling its purpose. Iran's role in the Messiah's birth was complete, but it had fulfilled a remarkable prophetic pattern. The same empire that had restored Israel's temple through Cyrus now honored Israel's ultimate temple in the form of Jesus Christ. But this ancient relationship between Persia and God's people wouldn't end here. It was only the beginning. In the visions yet to come, this connection would be transformed in ways that would change the world once again. The prophet Ezekiel was given a vision that revealed Iran's most dramatic transformation in biblical history. The nation that once freed Israel from Babylonian captivity and helped rebuild their temple would one day become their greatest threat. Ezekiel 38 speaks of a future coalition that will rise against Israel in the last days. And in Ezekiel 38:5, Persia, modern-day Iran, is explicitly named as one of Gog's allies. This marks a profound shift from Iran's historic role as Israel's protector to its role as one of the most dangerous enemies in the end times. The War of Gog and Magog outlines an unprecedented military alliance that will form in the last days. Ezekiel 38, 2-6 details the nations involved, including Gog of the land of Magog, Meshech, Tubal, Gomer, Togarmah, Persia, Cush, and Put. These ancient names correspond to regions across the Middle East, Africa, and Eastern Europe. By including Persia in this coalition, the prophecy directly ties modern Iran to Russia, Turkey, and North African powers. Nations that will unite against Israel with unparalleled force. This coalition's assault on Israel will be like nothing the world has ever seen. The invading armies are described as coming like a storm and like a cloud covering the land, symbolizing an overwhelming military force of unimaginable scale. This is not a border skirmish or a regional conflict. It's a full-scale, coordinated attack designed to utterly defeat Israel. The imagery of darkening skies like storm clouds signals the massive numbers and the destructive intent of these invading armies. Iran's participation in this final assault marks a staggering betrayal of its ancient relationship with Israel. The same empire that once issued royal decrees to help rebuild Jerusalem's temple will now lead the charge to wipe Israel off the map. The bloodlines of Cyrus the Great, who called himself a servant of Israel's God, will command armies set on Israel's destruction. It's a stunning example of how nations once aligned with divine purpose can turn against God's will. But there's a powerful twist in this prophecy. The overwhelming power of this invading coalition will trigger a dramatic, direct intervention from God on behalf of Israel. Ezekiel foretells earthquakes, fire from heaven, and confusion among the attacking armies, leading to their complete destruction. The same God who once used Persia to free Israel will now destroy the Persian-led alliance that seeks to destroy Israel. The weapons left behind by the defeated armies will burn for 7 years, showing the sheer scale of the military might consumed in this divine judgment. Some scholars see echoes of this prophecy in today's world. Iran's nuclear program, its vocal opposition to Israel's existence, and its increasing influence in the region create conditions that closely resemble Ezekiel's vision of the end times. Yet there's an unexpected glimmer of hope for Iran's future. In Jeremiah 49-39, God offers a surprising promise. I will shatter the bow of Elam, the backbone of its strength. Yet in the latter days I will bring back the captives of Elam. This prophecy suggests that while Iran will face severe judgment in the war of Gog and Magog, there is a promise of restoration afterward, a future where Iran might be spiritually renewed. This dual prophecy presents a compelling story of judgment and redemption. After the divine judgment on the invading coalition, Iran may undergo a spiritual awakening, eventually participating in the peace and healing of the world to come. The prophecy shows that even nations that have opposed God can still find redemption when they turn away from their rebellion. The ancient bloodlines that produced Queen Esther and supported the Magi's worship of Christ will face their greatest test in the end times, but the promise of restoration suggests that even those nations can be redeemed. The bloodlines of Iran, stretching back to Noah's grandsons Madai and Elam, have followed a remarkable journey through biblical history. From the rugged mountain fortresses of the ancient Medes to the palace halls, where Queen Esther risked her life to save her people, these bloodlines have consistently intersected with divine purpose. The same empire that produced Cyrus the Great, who freed Israel from captivity, now stands poised for its final prophetic role in the coming war of Gog and Magog. What's happening today in the Middle East isn't just a series of political conflicts. It's the continuation of a story that began in Genesis and will conclude in Revelation. Are we witnessing the final chapters unfold before our eyes? If you're someone who seeks hidden truths in Scripture, don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a comment below. Where do you think Iran's role is leading us in the grand narrative of biblical prophecy?